not sure at all if I'm going to get rained on or I'm going to have a glorious morning. But I've got a wee app that tells me about the potential for sunrise, and this morning had 78%, which I think might be the highest I've ever seen that one go. So I thought, hey, I got to get out. So I'm at a spot called Tunnel Beach, and I've got a little bit of a walk ahead of me. It is sort of down in that direction there. I'll flip this around in just a second, and it's a steep downhill and then unfortunately a steep uphill, but you know, part of the it's part of the thing. So here I go. It is certainly that time of year in the southern hemisphere where actually getting up in time to get out is probably the worst thing. I had my clock set for 4:45 this morning. It's now just a little past 5:30. A little bit of time before the sun rises, but as always, it always feels like it's a last-minute panic, a last-minute rush to actually get there in time. I can see some color developing over there, but I mean, everything's so dim yet. But anyway, it's the wonder. But I have to say, I like sunrise shots in the winter, our winter, much better when I can get up at 7 o'clock in the morning and be there in time for it. I didn't take much video as I was going. It never developed into too much. I don't know if you can tell, but it's overall pretty gray and bleh. It's raining a bit. Hey, there was huge potential, and we got a bit of color, and I think maybe not a bad image. I was excited to see that there are some different places to be able to stand. So they've done a lot of work here. They've put better pathways. They've put places. I think there are little concrete spots, and I think those are maybe spots where they're suggesting it might be a nice place to look from. But one of the best things they've done here is they've cut down a lot of the scrubby bush that used to be between us as photographers and the view, and now it's easier to get something a little nicer in your foreground, which is quite cool, and not have your main view obscured by stuff like gorse and whatnot. So yeah, it's quite cool. Again, I don't know, you know, the truth will be in the pudding when I get back to the computer and have a look at the images. It's always just a smidge hard. I find it anyway. I look at the things on the back of the camera, and yeah, there's always a slightly different impression than it is when I get it onto the computer. So we'll see. I'm not going to do heaps of video from this. Essentially, I took one image from sort of just over there, and just to give you a sense of what that's like. So just get this to spin around. That's sort of the bit that's got the hole jutting through it that juts out there, and then that's the bit that goes over to the side. Just have my 24 to 70 mil lens on, trying to get a bit of these lovely brownish grasses that are around right now. I felt we're going to make a nice foreground sort of element, so trying to get a bit of that in, but also not to go too wide. I don't know how the color of that water is going to show up, but it is just gorgeous. It's really cool because just down there, you can kind of see the pathway going down. There's actually, this is called Tunnel Beach because there's actually a guy a long time ago dug a tunnel from up here down to the beach that kind of sits in this little cove here. So you have to go through this dark little tunnel to get down there, but it's quite a cool endeavor if you don't mind tight enclosed spaces. Anyway, I think I'm going to probably just have a tiny wander. I'm going to check out some of the new paths and start to make my way back home again, I think. So I don't think much else is going to go on here this morning. Now, of course, the tricky bit, which is walking back up the hill. It's not a massive climb, but it's enough to kick you in the pants for sure. But that's all right because it is gorgeous. Check this out. That's what I have to look forward to on my walk. Here we are at the computer, and here is the image that I'm going to work with today. And this is the image after the edit. And I'll just show you, this is the image before the edit. So I'll be working on bringing that together. Now we can see here a few little things if you're interested in this kind of stuff. Shot it on ISO 800. Honestly, I often would have in the past tried to keep it on 100, but it was quite windy and I wanted to try and kind of freeze the grass decently. So I wanted to get my my shutter speed up a bit while still keeping my f-stop somewhere reasonable. So this is kind of where I've headed with that. I wanted to try to get that little bit of extra speed. And honestly, working in DxO, if you're watching this, no doubt you know, one of the massive claims to fame is how well it deals with higher ISOs or deals with calming noise. So in the end, I don't think this will be noisy at all. So with that little view out of the way, I'll close that down. Got my histogram here. Of course, this is the after image again, so you can see it's nice and spread out. Does go up against the edge here, but of course it's going to because we've got the sun, and the sun in fact is that bright. So I think a few years ago I would have tried to somehow contain that, but honestly it's not contained, and that's okay in my opinion at this point. It changes from day to day. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump into the edit. So this is, like I said, this is sort of the edit, and this is the starting point. So I'll put it to there, and then I'll make this go away so we've got a little bit more space, and I'll just pop this sort of down here for now. Right, so how will I start? I'm actually going to start with a cheat. It's not really a cheat, but somehow applying a preset sometimes feels like a cheat. But I'm just going to crank a natural on there, and that actually does a lot for me. Now, the one thing about natural, of course, is that sometimes for some images it can be maybe just a hair oversaturated, in my opinion. I'll show you in a few minutes a real reasonably easy fix for that. Probably the obvious one, yes, but I'll show you a little something. Right, so I've got my natural preset here, but of course I want to make some tweaks with that. So I'm just going to work my way through and make a few tweaks along the way. So first thing I'm going to do is put my exposure up around plus 20, or 0.2, pardon me. Just using that awesome right click trick. I use that all the time now. I suspected that it would really grow on me, and it sure did. So I'm just right clicking on the line. My apologies to anybody on a Mac, because this does not seem to work on the Mac side of things, but it does work on Windows, and it's fantastic. So I'll do my exposure up a little bit. I've got, as a part of that natural preset, it puts a little bit of spot lighting, or pardon me, smart lighting on the image. And I'm just going to change that over. I am actually going to leave it on, but I'm going to change it over to spot weighted. And of course it says there's no faces detected, but I don't want any faces. I'm going to put two spots that I wanted to think about. I'll just draw one out kind of around here, and I'll draw one out also on the grass just to see what it does with that information. And I think it does pretty nice things with that information. I think that makes a nice little difference. Now, the next thing I'll move on to is my selective tone, and I'm going to probably leave that on -15 where it is. I'll leave that on 18. I might just up my shadows just a smidge. That'll probably do right there. And then the blacks, just to bring sort of a little more contrast back to thing, I'm going to just pop that down just a little bit. So This is a little indicator of what my selective tone is doing, just lifting things again. So basically each one, exposure, I've lifted things a bit. Smart lighting, I've lifted things a bit more, but in a slightly different way. And now selective tone, again, a bit more, but in a slightly different way. And of course, this image was taken really early in the day, so I don't want to make it super bright. It was not super bright, but I do want it to have some kind of oomph. So I want there to be a nice wee spread there. Now, clear view, another thing that's interesting about this natural preset is that it adds a little bit of clear view, just a 10, and it makes a nice little difference. So although historically I have not used clear view much, I do often like this tiny little amount. So it's kind of changed my opinion on that. So I'll leave that on 10, and that's great. Okay, I've just backed up a little bit, so you might notice a little bit of a jump cut in here. But there was something that I noticed when I was doing my spotting, and I just needed to check on, if that was on the other image, and it makes perfect sense to me now. So let me work through this. So before I come off of clear view, I want to jump this up because I'm going to just fix some of my really atrocious spots. I won't go into huge detail with them. The thing that I needed to check on, because suddenly I noticed this, which is no doubt a raindrop actually on my lens. If I were to zoom in, you'd see, and you probably will see when I'm working, there's little, you can see the rain falling in the image. It's captured it. So this is probably actually a dot on my lens would be my case. And it's not, it's there, but it's not nearly so noticeable when the clear view is not cranked up. So that's why I suddenly noticed it while I was spotting, and I was like, oh, what on earth? So anyway, the spotting, let's do that real quick. You notice I cranked my clear view up, which is a great trick if you've never come across that trick before. And this is probably a touch big at this juncture. Let's see. Yeah, that'll do fine. I'm just going to do this quite quickly because I don't want to have you guys sat there watching me find dust spots. Sure, we all have better things to do than that. Okay, so we'll call that good enough. There's my dust spots fixed. So now I will bring my clear view back down to about 10, which is where it was, and I will continue on my way. So the next thing I want to do, and I'll just move this histogram back over here now that I can, is to just do a little change with the contrast. I'm going to put that on 0, and I'm going to just give myself about 10 on the fine contrast. I just really like the look of the fine contrast, and I do want to just throw it out there. You might not see fine contrast in your software. It's only here if you have Film Pack installed, which I happen to do. So I get fine contrast. It's well, you can read more on it. I won't go into it. Again, try to keep this tight. Sorry, I know I tend to ramble on sometimes, so I'll try to keep this tight. So fine contrast, and now we're going to move along from here. I won't do anything with the tone curve in this occasion, and I'll just come over here to my color space. Raw white balance is on about 5200. Now I know on the other image, I probably experimented. It was on about, I want to say 4995. So that's fine. I'll go there just, for consistency's sake. Actually, the 5200 looked fine to me as well. But I quite like some of the more kind of purples and magentas that come out there. To me, this image, I quite like this image. It's reasonably well framed. I quite like the composition decently, but to me, it's all about the color that has come out in this occasion. And without the color, it would be much less kapow. So we'll leave that there, 49.95. That's all good. And I was just saying before about how the natural preset, not the natural rendering. The natural rendering, even on its own, is quite a colorful rendering. So you might come across this, but especially with the preset, if you come down to HSL, it is on. And if I just look at this global sort of channel here, you can see that saturation and vibrancy are both up a bit there. So if you are finding it too colorful, just come down and turn off or tweak your HSL, and that will go a long way. But it is otherwise kind of a nice color rendition, in my opinion. I often like it quite a bit. Now, moving over to the detail tab,
I am going to put on Deep Prime. I could, of course, use Deep Prime XD, which is going to try to kind of sharpen things more, etc. But I'm actually reasonably happy with how sharp that is. I don't know that it'll translate. If I click on Deep Prime XD, I can visually see a little bit more crispiness to this, but not necessarily crispiness that I want in this instance. So I'm quite happy with Deep Prime. Plus, it's only 800. It's not like I pushed it that far. And the other thing that I'll do while I'm in this detail tab is I'm just going to down my lens softness correction just a little bit. And this is something for years I didn't even really pay attention to. This one, it just happened in the background and did its thing. But I've become aware of it a bit more recently, and I've noticed that sometimes, especially in stuff that's got really high repeat, like grass, sometimes with leaves, I find it a little too strong. Everything looks just a little too crispy to me. So I'm just going to down this maybe to 0.5. I'm kind of just picking that out of the air, but I feel like that looks a little bit better to my eye. And now next, I'm going to just come over here to my geometry sort of tab area. I need to click on horizon, and it's actually done a nice job of straightening that out for me. It just did the auto setting. And I already had this on auto based on keystoning and horizon, etc. So it's already sort of cropped itself in at that same ratio. So that's all good. Now I've just got a few local adjustment sort of finishing moves that I want to do. So I'm going to come up here to my local space, and I'm going to, first of all, grab control point. It will draw. And I'm going to put a couple of control points, pretty big ones, down here. And I want them reasonably general. So I'm going to actually even just down these a little bit, just so they'll be more general, more of like a radial, rather than selecting a particular thing. And with that, I just want to give it a little extra kiss of light in the center there. Not heaps. And with that little extra kiss of light that I've given it, I think it also needs a little extra contrast. So I think that that's reduced the contrast just a little bit. So I'm actually going to go maybe about plus 20 on the contrast. So we got before and after. Small thing, but it just gives it that little extra kiss of light. To my eye, I quite enjoy it. Call that one kiss. Now I want to add more control points. Just keep in mind, if I just straight away came down and added a control point, it would become part of this set because I've not told it that I want to do a new one. So I'm going to do a new mask. Now when I click, it will be an independent set with its own controls. So I'm going to put one here. I'm going to bring that in quite a bit. One here. In quite a bit. Oh yes, maybe there. Maybe there. Let's see. So essentially with these ones, I don't want them to spread out too much. I tried to put them on the lighter rocks, and I'm going to just up the ante a little bit here to try and make them more specific in terms of the selection that they're doing. And you can see that kind of is, there's a bit of spill down here in the water especially, but by and large, it's really putting the bulk of the effect in the spots that I've chosen. Now I'm just going to come down here to my selective tone, and I want to increase the midtones a bit. I basically want to try to drag that part of the histogram up a little bit. Yep, I think that's looking good. And I'll also give it just a little bit of shadow lift. Nice. Now to try and maintain the contrast in this space, what I'm going to do is give it a bit of clear view. Yeah, I think that's looking nice. And then the last thing that I want to do is just make sure that the color is still nice and strong in there. So I'm just coming down here to the vibrancy space and going to just bump that a bit. Nice. So let's do a wee before and after on that one. Should I rename it here? Rocks. Again, just trying to add just a little bit of light. to not make them look fake, but to make them look just a little bit more like they're getting more than they actually did. Right, so the last one that I want to do, and again, I need to come here and click my plus because this is going to be a new thing, and I want this one actually to be a control line. And this one I'm going to put on the grass down here. Might just drag that up a touch. I think probably this is in a fine spot, but I'll move it down there for good measure. Cool, that looks quite reasonable. And what I want to do here is actually just a couple of things in HSL. I want to bring my vibrance down on those reds in the grass. And then in the red space, I want to bring my luminance up just a smidgen. And I can just do grass. And again, I'll just before and after that. See? Hopefully that'll show up on YouTube, but it just takes a smidge of the intensity out of it. To me, the grass is a supporting character, and I didn't want it to be quite as colorful as it was. So anyway, so there we go. So as I do the compare button here, because I still have a local adjustment selected, it will only be my local adjustments that are comparing, and there are different ways to do this. This is just how I do it. So that's what the local adjustments are doing. Just changing things a little bit. Now, if I turn this off and I come to compare, this is my overall before and after. So there we have it, my image of Tunnel Beach. Hope that you have enjoyed the video. Hope that it's been useful to you watching me doing this processing, or at the very least enjoyable in some way. With that, I will say thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk again soon. Bye for now.